Hello and welcome, my name is Trismegistus and today we're going to be reading through and running in screaming terror from the latest Factorio Friday Facts. Friday Facts 424, Gleba Pentapod Enemies. Posted by Arundel. Hello, it is time. Stompy time. If you don't want spoilers on enemies and want to discover them naturally, then you might want to skip this one. And I would just echo that. If you are wanting any kind of surprise on the Gleba enemies, then do skip this one because it is basically all about the enemies and their mechanics and all of that stuff. So if you want a surprise, do skip it. Let's continue the story from Friday Facts 413. A trumpeting scream quietens all the small animals. You hear the breaking of waves followed by stomping, earth-shaking steps that are getting louder and louder. Looking in the direction of the sound, you see a cliff rising to a tall hill. The fungus at the top shakes with each stomp, but the source is somewhere further behind the hill. You ready your weapons, but the sound stops getting louder and instead moves to the right, then gradually fades into the distance. Whatever it was big. After climbing the hill to investigate, you see a valley on the other side. Some large, translucent green eggs float on a raft of slimy foam in a pool of shallow water. You get closer. The eggs are soft like jelly, the portion above water sagging under their own weight. In the centre is a dark, blurry mass of tangled limbs and eyes. So next part is a video, and we'll do like we've done the other videos and sort of watch it through together without me saying anything, and then I'll sort of kind of comment on some of the bits as we go through. It is also in 4K. I'll put the link in the description below as well, but you can also obviously go to the Friday Facts and just go to that. I'm not going to play the 4K version because my internet is not good enough to like stream 4K video basically, so we'll watch the one on the website, which is a little smaller, but zoom it in. Okay, so I will turn the volume down on it, but just to comment, I mean, I think most of what we heard was the music. There is what appears to be kind of like cries in the music, like animal cries, and I think, as I say, I think that's part of the music rather than necessarily being enemy sound effects. I think the idea is to give an atmosphere on the planet of like, you know, things running around in the distance. It's, you know, the biological planet, there's lots of animal life, there's lots going on, and I think that's like trying to be captured in the music. So it'll be interesting to see in reality what is sound effects from enemies and what is actual music. But to me it feels like a lot of those like faint, distant, groany noises are perhaps part of the soundtrack rather than the actual enemies we see on screen, or I think they're probably there as well, sort of thing. So yeah, that's just a note on the sound. It does note very late on in the Friday Facts that a lot of sound, well, not a lot, but some of the sound isn't quite finished anyway, so it's not the final, like as in the sound rather than music. Just to play through, it is kind of the story time side of it is going to kind of explain what's going on there. You know, it's meant to be roughly equivalent to the video. Basically, the engineer is coming through this shallow sea. You notice the water splashes there. This is all sort of shallow sea, basically. So I had a speculation a long time ago that it was a shallow sea on Gleba, and so that's kind of confirmed that that's the case. And it looks like basically all of the water might be shallow sea, basically, and that you can walk through all of it. And there'll be a reason for that later on. But yeah, so the engineer sort of runs, through this area, And coming up next is these little tiny enemies. I'm not going to talk about them because it will go into some depth on them, but these are very small enemies that are relatively weak, and so they're taken out by some laser turrets, and I think the player basically fires on them as well. But then we see this green blobby mass here and sort of pulsating. Does it pulsate, or was that my imagination? It doesn't, does it? But there's a sort of they attack, and there's like a response like the biters would do. Oh yeah, it is sort of pulsating a little bit. But when it bursts, it fires out all loads and loads of these little enemies. Okay. They're then taken down fairly easily using personal lasers and the flamethrower. But we then get this guy comes in, the very long-legged enemy, Pentapod. Pentapod's obviously because 5 legs, pentagons, they all appear to have 5 legs. And that thing appears to launch some kind of flying enemy. Okay. Now we'll talk about it more in speculation, but I think it's flying in a technical sense. I don't think it's a natively flying enemy, because if you notice when it hits first time, this one here, it actually drops to the surface. So it hits there, and you see it's dropping to the surface, and now it then attacks the player. So basically it's a flying version, or an air version, of the tiny little, I keep wanting to call them biters, but they do have a name. I can't remember what it is. Wrigglers, I think, something like that. Or crawlers, I can't remember. But they're basically more like missiles, basically. So rockets or missiles. They're not really flying in the sense that they're native flying things. The idea is that these guys launch them, and that they basically throw them at the player. And then, they act like a missile, so they have the same homing thing that missiles do that we use. And so effectively, we've got enemies with the missile type attack that we can do. So they kind of plug in that gap. I recently put my combat video out, and that was one of the things I was speculating if effectively they might gap fill. That they might fill in gaps where, say, we've got an ability that the enemies don't, or the enemies have got ability that we don't have, and that effectively you might just see filling in of those gaps, basically. And this is one of them. So we've effectively got an enemy that stands off. If you notice on this long-legged guy, it's called a Strafer, that it attempts to keep its distance from the player. So shooting it with guns and lasers is difficult, although the rocket has enough range to attack it. Okay, it's quite weak though, because it doesn't take many shots for this one to go down. I think he starts firing missiles at it. There you go. And it doesn't seem to take too many, just a couple of hits for the missiles and it's gone. But then it spawns a whole load of the tiny ones, okay? And they obviously dash at the player. So this is clearly an overwhelm mechanic, get as many enemies on you as they can. They rush in really quickly, they're short range attack things, and by being flying in as well, that means that it can get you with a load all at once. So they're not strong enemies, but they are swarm enemies, basically. You see, it's already at a stage where there's a lot of stuff to deal with. Fortunately, it goes into the night. I think it's probably deliberate so that it can show off the flame attack, but it makes it difficult to see what's going on. Yeah, so it then comes through. We then get a third enemy comes on, a really, really big guy, and this is the Stomper. This is the Stompy boy. And this comes in, and it's more like a melee type attack. Now, it does explain what attack it's doing. It's doing 2. It's actually spitting, and you can very occasionally see, I'm trying to pause it so that we can see one happening. It does spit at the player, but it's very difficult to catch it. I don't think the sound effects are in it, but you can sort of just see it occasionally that it does spit. But what it's actually mainly trying to do is stamp on you. So it's trying to, put its legs on you and hit you with its legs. And there is apparently an area of effect around where it stomps. Unfortunately, I think, again, that's another one where the sound effects aren't in because it doesn't sound very impactful. And because we can't see the health bar or the shields, we can't really tell when we're being hit because it doesn't appear to have... Oh, there you go. So there appeared to be both a stomp, which I think is why we've got this sort of discoloration here, and a spit. There you go. So I think that's a stomp going on, but it's also spitting at us if you look very, very closely. Because these obviously fly in, then it seems to stomp on us, and I think there's a bit of spit going on there as well. So It's a very short range attack, but it's like a close-in defense, basically. But you can see that this guy is tanking a lot of damage. The engineer actually seems to have, it's well equipped, basically, the player. It's got at least a couple of laser defenses. It's clearly got some shields on. Engineer is using flamers and the submachine gun at the very least, and missile, launcher. So it's certainly at a stage in the game where a good amount of stuff is unlocked, and I think it's level 2 power armor, but it's a little difficult to tell with the scale. But yeah, it's taking loads of damage, and the player is having to strafe around and avoid the attacks while also using close-in weapon systems. Fire doesn't seem quite as effective against it, which is interesting. This takes quite a lot of fire damage. That's a fairly, even a behemoth would be done by now, and they're, the tankiest we've got, and it's already taken a lot of hits from lasers and rounds and stuff like that. So yeah, it's clearly a really tough enemy. They also go on to reveal eventually, this is level 1, and there are 3 levels. So these guys are going to be tough. These guys are going to be difficult to beat in any kind of volume. So yeah, it's going to be a challenging enemy, I think, which is one of the things that I know a lot of people were kind of hoping for. So that was, I've strayed into speculation, haven't I? But we'll pick up quite a few other points later on in the more detailed speculation. Suddenly, the egg erupts and a clawed limb swipes at your face. A strange creature wriggles around in the water trying to claw at you, and through the splashing you make out 5 limbs like a starfish. A bulging head-like structure has many eyes on one side and a sponge-like material on the other. On the sides of its head are crests of transparent blisters that are inflating with air to form something like a paddle or wing. It drags itself around like some sort of ravenous tentacled baby. With the occasional lurching movement, it launches itself at you, trying to grapple you with its limbs and bite you with its underside. The claws glance off your energy shield with minimal damage. Your personal laser defense springs into action, and in a flash of light the newborn is cut to shreds. The laser then switches targets to the egg raft. A few moments later, all the eggs burst into a horrifying swarm of angry thrashing creatures. The sea of flailing limbs and odd movement makes it difficult to target individuals. You bravely retreat back to the cliff and equip the flamethrower to protect yourself with a wall of fire. The undaunted, wriggling creatures run straight into the fire and die soon after. Another trumpeting scream pierces the sky, but this time it doesn't sound distant at all. A slender, towering creature stares straight at you with its large, bulging eyes. It strafes sideways, circling you, gracefully stepping over cliffs and tree-like fungi with its 5 thin legs. It launches something from its head, a projectile high into the air and arcing towards you. You start retreating, but 4 wings spread from the side of the projectile and it steers towards you like a homing missile. The flying creature rams into you, grappling you with its clawed limbs and slowing your movement. You throw it down to the ground and it becomes indistinguishable from the Wriggler you dispatched earlier. Your laser defences make short work of it, but without warning you're struck by another projectile creature from the other side. Another Strafer has arrived and is also bombarding you. Both Strafers are staying out of range of your automated laser. You dash towards one of the Strafers with your submachine gun in hand, but as you do, the Strafer to your front retreats and the other advances. They seem intent on keeping you at range, constantly circling while flinging homing projectiles. No matter, you have another weapon up your sleeve. You dash forward again, this time with a rocket launcher in hand. A rocket snakes its way through the air and blasts its way into the first Strafer. The creature shrieks and attempts to retreat, but another rocket is already on its way. The second rocket strikes unerringly, and moments later, the Strafer is blown apart, leaving a cloud of pieces to rain down on the swamp below. Stomp, stomp, stomp. The stomping has returned. A colossal spiked shell rises into view from behind a hill. It strides effortlessly over a cliff with its 5 huge armour-plated legs. This creature is clearly related to the others, but it is far heavier with a wide stance and thick legs. The central body, or head region, is like a shielding shell, with small eyes peering through narrow holes. You fire some rockets at the Stomper, and they do some damage, but nowhere near enough to take it down. You have very few rockets left, and they won't be able to kill the Stomper, so it's better to save them for the other Strafer, which is difficult to catch otherwise. The Stomper charges towards you. Even with your exoskeleton equipped, the Stomper can outrun you. You stand your ground with the submachine gun, but you can't dodge effectively while you fire. As it gets closer, the tremors stress your shield, and thrown debris from its stomps pummels the shields further. The creature lands a foot directly on you, and your shields falter. That hurt. This isn't working. You start moving again, not to outrun it, but to outmaneuver it. It may be faster than you in a straight line, but it can't change direction as quickly. The other Strafer is still alive, and flinging new enemies at you from a distance. By switching between dodging movement and bursts of SMG fire, you're able to evade most of the Stompers' damage, and keep the number of Wrigglers low enough not to get overwhelmed. You wait for an opening when you're not being stomped on, or swarmed, and the Strafer is in view. Away go the last 2 rockets, and success. The last Strafer falls dead. Now it's just you and the Stomper, a duel to the death. While continuing to dodge its feet, you make your way to a large area of land to make your last stand. No more rockets, gun ammo is low, time for the flamethrower to shine. As you circle each other, you douse the area in flames. The dance continues in flames until one of you falls. More fire, more spinning, more fire. The world becomes a hazy blur of flames, smoke, and death. So that's the end of story time. To say, I kind of decided I'd read that through. I mean, it sort of describes what's going on in the video, and obviously we've been through that. There are some interesting points in there which we will come back to. But yeah, it sounds like the combat is going to be similar, but different, basically. Mechanics. The new enemies on Gleba are pentapods, 5-legged creatures. They are based on distant relatives of starfish or sea stars, so sometimes we call them starfish, land stars, or starfeet. Mostly, though, we call them by their most common forms of Stompers, Strafers, and Wrigglers. Stompers are the big ones, Strafers are the intermediate-sized ones, I guess. They're pretty big, and the Wrigglers are the tiny little ones. In case you're not familiar, obviously, I don't see why you wouldn't be, but starfish are the legged creatures of the sea. Sea star, from what I can tell, is kind of an alternate name for them. They are basically the same thing, but as you can see, they are kind of 5-legged generally. I think there are ones with lots of different legs, but the most sort of common, familiar one is the 5-legged one. Although I'm pretty sure there are like 9-legged and 7-legged. I'm pretty sure it's always an uneven number. Oh, there you go, there's one. Sunflower sea star with lots and lots of legs there. When you first encounter the pentapods, it could be that you rushed to space, went straight to Gleba, and are very weak in combat. At the other end of the spectrum, this could be your 3rd new planet, and you could have spent a long time investing in military technology, including new weapons from other planets. This range of combat capability makes it difficult to choose a good starting threat level of the enemies. For now, we're going for a threat level that makes the starting evolutions difficult if you are completely unprepared, but still survivable if you have standard equipment, even if it's lacking in damage upgrades. Also, if you are completely unprepared, that just means the enemies are difficult to take down on your own, but then an engineer with a pocket full of turrets never needs to be solo. So, what that's saying is, and it's one of the things I've been wondering about for the whole combat question, there's been kind of suggestions that certainly Gleba and Volcanus have enemies, okay? We don't know really about the other two. My suspicion is there is some threat on Fulgora, as I've mentioned in a lot of videos, and Aquilo would seem like a shoo-in for some kind of combat, threat type thing. But the basic point that Erendel is making is that because they have this desire for you to be able to go to all 3 planets, intermediate planets, in any order that you want, Aquilo is always last. Now, obviously, is always first, but the other 3 you can go to in any order you want. They have basically said that evolution is independent on each of the 3 planets. So, if you've spent all this time on Alvis and you've buffed up your military, and then you've gone to Fulgora, which maybe turns out to have no enemies itself, but gives you the Tesla turret, and then you come to Gleba, so you're like super buffed, you've got all your personal equipment. Maybe you also go to Volcanus, and that helps you make, because you'll have quality, you see, and so you could have level 2, because the maximum quality, in fact, if you've been to Fulgora, I guess you could have level 3 quality, you could have level 5 quality, sorry, but you'd have the level 3 modules to help you make level 5 quality. Terminology is going to get confusing, isn't it? But the basic point is you could have gone to the other 2 planets, or one of them, and done a load of stuff to research combat, and you could have lots of turrets, you could have lots of weapons, so you could turn up and the enemies are just a pushover, because you're basically almost at max level, you're almost like the end game of a normal playthrough. Whereas the other option is you could have basically not bothered with combat. You could have gone as quickly as you possibly can through the tech tree to get your space platform. You've gone straight to Gleba, Why you're doing that, I don't know, because we don't really know what you would get out of Gleba, other than a missile turret, which, if you're not rushing why would you be doing that if you were not really interested in combat? So basically, you could be arriving here as some scrub tier noob, basically, or a super powerful god. Okay, so how do you balance that? Because if the evolution is independent, then you're always starting at 0, essentially, when you arrive on Gleba, and they want to give you some challenge. But how do you control that? Because you don't know how much the player has already done. And their point is that they've sort of pitched it so that if you've done nothing, you are a bit wimpy and you're probably going to struggle with the combat. And so you'll have to rely a lot on turrets. If you've done a lot of research, then it sounds like there's going to be 3 levels of enemies. And so even when you get to level 3, you're going to be it's going to be a tough challenge for you there. And all you've done is made the earlier part simpler. That seems to be what they're basically, how they're kind of solving that problem, essentially. One of the reasons we can risk the Pentapod enemies starting with better combat capability than biters is because they are fairly passive. They will defend their nests and attack you if you attack a nearby ally, but otherwise they will leave you alone, at first. If you do fight them and win, they will evolve. So that sounds like one of their evolution things. It is a kill them, they will evolve, a bit like biters. Pollution? Pollution on Gleba is different. The usual pollution sources aren't a problem for Gleba's ecosystem. It's already a high CO2 environment, and the fungi would eat up most industrial pollutants. Instead, Gleba's pollution mechanic is based on aroma and spores. So interesting, the mention there of spores. Aroma, I think, is effectively the same thing as pollution. It's a cloud of smell, essentially. As you can see already with the yellow thing here, I think that's why it's yellow, basically, because it's a smell rather than a pollution. The fungi that you need to grow, harvest and process are the same ones that the enemies eat. Nice to see I got that one right. The agricultural activities make spores and smells that eventually attract the pentapods. Also, as with Nalvis pollution, the effect does cause the local enemies to evolve as they are exposed to your agricultural growth formula and meddling ways. So this is then just a map view basically showing the new pollution. The caption reads, "The cloud of spores and pollen smells like meddling." So it's interesting it uses spores and pollen there rather than aroma and spores. I don't think that's a speculation, but I think it's just a little bit of a cock-up basically. And the idea is it's clouds of tiny particles, be it spores, be it pollen, what have you, that the pentapods would be able to smell. I don't think there's any hidden meaning in suddenly using the word pollen, basically. But this is basically the map. We will come back to this because there are a few little bits and pieces on here. But essentially what this is showing is this is the pollution. This is the yellow pollution area. We can also see what I think is the equivalent of them smelling, catching the aroma of the pollution, because if you look, these are basically circular around these areas here, and we will get to what those are in the speculation. But you notice how this is sort of indented, and this is indented here, and we see the little red dots, which are clearly the enemies, and then here there's a similar thing going on. So I think essentially to a large degree it works in the same way as pollution, but there are some subtle differences basically, and so we'll speculate about what those are later. Egg rafts. Egg rafts are the pentapod equivalent of spawners. They only appear in shallow waters of the various Gleba marshlands, which both you and your enemies can wade through. This keeps them away from the drier highland areas, which are easy to build in, but puts them close to the areas where you want to harvest your agricultural products. Destroying an egg raft will yield some of the pentapod eggs it contained. Pentapod eggs are a key ingredient needed to make the biochamber, an important bioprocessing machine on Gleba. Make sure to use the eggs quickly though. Like many biological items on Gleba, they're on a timer. However, they don't spoil in the normal way. Wait too long and you may find yourself face to face with a hungry hatchling pentapod. You will need quite a few biochambers in your time on Gleba. More importantly though, Gleba might need more biochambers when you are not there. So, of course, just automate everything. With a bit of technology you can turn a limited egg supply into a fully automated but somewhat risky production cycle. Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there, and some of it is more speculation from me rather than anything, but it's interesting that we're getting confirmation of some mechanics that I was guessing at. So if we go back to the video, okay, then here, up the top right here, this is where the engineer burst the raft, the egg raft thing, okay? So when he was popping it there, yeah, that's the same popped pod, basically. And if you notice, there are 9 little eggs, basically. So this is essentially the return of alien artifacts. So back in the earlier versions of the game, there used to be a mechanic where you would destroy the spawners and they would leave little pink alien artifacts, they were just called, which never made sense as to what they really were. Making them eggs makes a lot more sense. They did always look like they had... it was weird, I'll be honest. It had looked like it had an anime face in it, but it looked like it was a biological thing, and these appear to be the return of that, essentially. So the way you get them is by destroying these chamber things, these egg rafts, the egg rafts, and that will give you some. But it sounds like you can then develop a technology that allows you to grow them, okay? And so you then don't become... Because one of the problems with the alien artifacts mechanic was always that you had to go out and kill nests. Yeah, you didn't get them from biters. So you couldn't just sit there, waves of enemies coming in, waves of biters coming in, you kill them with your turrets, and then you farm the alien eggs with bots. That wasn't how they worked. Instead, you only got them when you popped the actual spawners, which means you always had to constantly go out and kill spawners. Obviously, they could fill in gaps, they could come and evolve, but then when we got the artillery turret, it was, they'd already got rid of the artifacts by that point. But if you imagine the only ones that are being popped, producing things, are like way out in the distance, you would have to manually go around and hoover them up, or I guess later on we got Spidertron. But the point was that it was a really annoying mechanic, okay, and it looks like it's back. But now we can do a research that lets us grow the eggs. However, when they spoil, they actually hatch and produce presumably one of these Wrigglers, or maybe several, and they would then obviously start attacking your base, presumably. There is a little bit of a question here as to if they're a bit passive, then what do they attack your base, or do they just run around, sort of thing? I guess they do, maybe, but I say a bit of a question there. But yes, this is what I've been speculating about. Now, we did actually see on our previous Friday Facts. So I can't find the specific Friday Facts. This is actually the video from Steam. But you may remember there were biter corpses on this platform, and even more up here. And this was the origin of my speculation, especially finding out, the Gleba involved what appeared to be eggs and things like that, and biological stuff, that maybe when you're transporting them, that they could spawn into life, basically, that the eggs could hatch. Now, obviously, these are normal biter corpses, so I don't know that this is really an answer to this. I mean, these could be placeholders for the Gleba enemies, maybe, and they just didn't have a dead pentapod texture to put on, sort of thing, and so they just used the biter one, and maybe this is transporting eggs around. So maybe that was what was going on, but I don't know. I'm still of the mind that we will be moving biters around in some way. Don't know. We'll have to see. But yes, it looks like these egg rafts are in the water, basically in the shallow sea, and it's already said that the enemies are a bit more passive. They probably perhaps don't colonize in quite the same way that biters do, but they will attack when attacked, and they're drawn to your pollution, your spores, your whatever you want to call it, aroma, and so they will come and investigate that sort of thing, potentially eat your plants by the sound of things. But essentially what you get out of these guys is a usable resource, basically. So you get the eggs, and you can use the eggs to make the biochambers, okay? And you can automate that process, but when they hatch, after a certain amount of time, you've then got a load of biters, pentapods, in your base. Wrigglers. So it's just got the video to start with, and then the actual explanation is afterwards. So it says, Wrigglers are not very threatening individually. The damage from their claws is reasonable, but they are very fragile and tend to die quickly to most weapons in your arsenal. Most weapons tend to suggest me that there is a resistance that they have. You know, they're perhaps resistant to a particular type of damage, but that's it sort of thing, and otherwise you can sort of kill and shoot them quite easily. Their true advantage is in overwhelming numbers. Both Stompers and Strafers can deliver newborn Wrigglers straight to you. When you are faced with a large threat like a Stomper, it is easy to overlook the steady accumulation of seemingly weak Wrigglers, and before long they become a viciously deadly horde. So then there's just the video here, and we see them wriggling around, basically. They're kind of like possibly the closest to that starfish design. They don't quite move like starfish do, but I would guess, that's almost like the idea is they're more evolved, and they're kind of developing almost like a bipedal bias in a sense, because if you notice, they get sort of, two legs are tending to, move them forward, and then one is like out the back, like a tail almost, and it's, suggests that kind of, because starfish doesn't move like that at all, it just moves its, 5 legs. There is an interesting thing on this in that there's a different one here, and I think that's meant to be the intermediate level. So I think, and it does say later on, there are green, gold, and red as your 3 levels. And so I think these are the green guys. So I think these are level 1. This here, I think that's the gold one. So I think that's an intermediate. So it's got like, it seems to be bigger. And I assume what's happened is effectively the player has walked up here, and so it's gone to attack. And these other guys are, because they're lower, like a bit like smaller biters probably don't have as big a range of attack. Certainly worms, the small worms have a smaller aggro range compared to like behemoth worms. And I assume that's the case with this guy, and that's why he dashes off to come and attack us. Strafers. Again, starts off with the video, but we'll go through the explanation first. Strafers are very fragile, but use range and speed to outmaneuver opponents. They launch flying Wrigglers at their target like a homing missile. When a flying Wriggler hits the target, it falls to the ground, becoming a normal Wriggler, ready to keep attacking. Strafers try to keep their targets at a distance and circle it, strafing it basically. They outrange the gun and laser turret, so you will need to consider this in your defences. If you place a single turret, then the Strafer will be able to destroy it with no consequences. However, if you make a large area of turrets, then the Strafer will try to circle the one turret it is fixated on, and while doing so, it will probably wander into the range of another turret. When they take damage, they will try to back away, but they can't change direction instantly. So if they go into range of some turrets, they will not make it back out. Ideally, you want weapons with long range and or a high alpha strike, like the rocket turret, which is unlocked on Gleba, or the Tesla turret from Fargora. So first off, obviously they're confirming that the rocket turret is a Gleba unlock. We didn't know that for sure. Interestingly, that was my speculation point in my video, although I kind of wimped out on saying it was definitely on Gleba, because it could have been unlocked anywhere. But yeah, we knew it was on an intermediate planet, and it's nice to have the confirmation of Gleba, and it makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Because if this guy can stand at a distance far enough away that gun turrets and laser turrets can't shoot them, then you need something that's able to hit them, and that's the missile turret. Its attack is interesting. So what it does, essentially, because it's kind of giving the enemies, so these strafers, are essentially acquiring a missile firing capability, but their missiles are Wrigglers, so they're able to throw or fire the smaller enemies, and presumably they do damage when they hit you, but then they also then become a land-based enemy that is able to continue to attack you. So if you disturb quite a lot of these, or get a lot of them attacking you, or really tough ones, then you've got the difficulty, like it did in the video, that they're too far away for you to shoot with most of your weapons, but also they're firing in all these missiles at you, which are then turning into Wrigglers. And so if you get a lot of these, or the higher level ones presumably, they're actually going to be a real threat, because even though they take 2 missiles to die, they can fire out a load of stuff and keep away from you, and making it difficult for you to attack them. The point seems to be with the turrets that they could, because they could, like you can with worms and stuff and your cannon, they can basically sit out of range of the thing and just destroy it. But they appear to, why they're called strafing, is that they do a strafing behaviour. They just generally sit there, rotating around whatever they're interested in or attacking. And so if you've got other turrets, then they'll wander into the range of the turrets and get attacked. And the idea seems to be that they can't change direction easily. So once they're doing this strafing thing, they're kind of locked into it and they can only slowly change direction. What I think we're also seeing here, just for clarity, I think this is, again, the gold version. Okay, because if you notice, this guy is smaller, essentially. He's greener and smaller than this guy. So I think this is the gold version, the intermediate level one. And it looks bigger, and sort of slightly tougher, I guess. But yeah, I think that's basically what's going on. We'd also see another egg sac, and this is larger. So I don't know if that means that they can grow over time or there are just larger ones. But that is definitely way bigger than that one. But yeah, what that means, I don't really know. Do you get more out of it? Is it, tougher or what? We obviously don't really know. By alpha strike, by the way, it just means high alpha strike. It just literally means that the first one causes a lot of damage, basically. So if you have explosive rockets, they cause a lot more, explosive damage, and a lot more damage than rockets. And so it has a high alpha strike. Its first strike is a powerful strike, basically. So something like a normal bullet is very low in its individual impact, but you shoot a lot at the target and you will eventually chip damage away, basically. Whereas the idea, something with probably the maximum alpha strike that we've got is the nuclear missile. So if you hit them with a nuclear missile, they're just gone, and it just kills them instantly. They can't tank it, basically. Stompers. And again, just starts with a video, so we'll read through the explanation first and then come back and observe what we can with this. Stompers are extremely tough and can tank a lot of damage. They have a short-range spit attack, but their primary attack is stomping prey with their feet. The foot does a lot of damage with a direct hit, but there's also an area of splash damage when the creature stomps in combat mode. The splash damage means that densely packed defences take more damage, so sparse networks of defences are more resilient to their attacks. When a Stomper is killed, the young Wrigglers it protects under its shell are released as new opponents. The Stompers and Strafers can both walk over walls and cliffs, so walling yourself in is not as effective on Gleba. The Wrigglers can't bypass walls once they're on the ground, but that doesn't help when they can be thrown over the wall by a Strafer, or delivered inside by a Stomper. So, this is them there. Obviously the idea is that these great big legs stomp on whatever they're trying to kill. It also has a spit attack. It does kind of explain how it works later on, or what it's meant to be. But basically, yeah, so it's got a sort of very short range spit by the look of things, but its main idea is it runs up, tries to stomp on whatever it's trying to kill. I think this is a green one. We don't see a gold one, I don't think, so I don't think there's an intermediate one or a high level one being shown. I think this is just the low level one, and these look... The rafts look about the same size to me, but they also look more evolved in a sense, if you see what I mean. This looks like it's got more gold on it, if you see what I mean, compared to this. It's not radically different, but I'm wondering, basically what I'm wondering is that, is there a mechanic for the nests where they kind of grow, the rafts, whether they develop, and so they've got more like Wrigglers in them, basically. So when you pop them, you get more eggs, but you're also attacked by a load more Wrigglers, and also at the same time, the enemies that would be associated with a more evolved one are higher level enemies. Okay, that's kind of where I'm getting at with that. Question. Design. We knew we wanted many new enemies of very different types. Albert imposed some initial constraints. There should not be anything with fur, and there should be no vertebrates. So the direction there essentially is to do insect-style creatures. I mean, it's not all insects, but things that have armour on them, essentially, that have an outer skeleton, so that keeps them all, I guess, thematically similar, and also stops sort of I don't know if they'd be concerned about this, but it stops them being cute. My first few designs covered a wide range of directions, so next he added the constraint that things shouldn't get too alien. So that puts us in the range of designs that approximately look like they could have evolved from an Earth creature thousands or millions of years ago. That's still a huge range of options though. Nature can be freaky. We also knew that at least some of the enemies should be very large. One of the problems with 2D sprites for large enemies is that not only is the sprite automatically larger, but also that for any rotation, a pixel moves more the further it is from the centre of rotation. To stop pixels from jumping too much, we need more frames to make the rotation smooth. But that's even more pixels for the sprite sheets, so large rotating things are doubly bad. So to give that a bit more explanation, a bit more context, it's really, if you think about concentric circles, okay? So if you're a small thing and you are rotating round, then you are going round the edge of this small circle in the middle here. If you're a big thing, then you are going round the outside, okay? Now, one of the things you can potentially do is have the thing on the big thing move quicker, essentially. So it's wouldn't be moving quicker in terms of angular terms. So the amount of angle that it turns, because that's the angle there, that wouldn't necessarily change. It might move at, say, 15 degrees a second or something. And so that would take it at the same constant radial rotational speed. If you think about this as a record player, for those who remember record players, the angle that this is turning at needs to be constant, otherwise it becomes broken, essentially. But its linear speed increases as you go out. So if you're on this inner circle, the linear speed, so the amount of distance you are covering in terms of centimetres of distance, is much smaller if you are going at the same angular speed as something going around the outside here, okay? So one of the ways you can sort of fake the problem is by having the thing being really rotating fast at its edges, okay? But if it's something biological like an enemy, if you imagine a biter turning slowly in the middle, when you scale that up, suddenly the edge of that biter is turning at a ridiculous rate, and it just looks silly. The thing is whipping around like nobody's business, and it just looks stupid, okay? So you have to slow it down in terms of angular rotation and keep a linear speed constant, okay? But that means you only travel a certain distance around the circle at each area. So here maybe you would want 5, because you have to remember that every angle it's at needs a separate picture, basically, because they're sprite-based animations, so every one is a separate picture. So here you would need, say, 9 pictures in order to do a nice rotation. Here you need 18, just as a number, but you get the idea, a lot more in order to break this down into more slices, basically. And so the amount of linear distance you're travelling between them is then equivalent in each one, but the number of steps that you need to go round this full circle is increased. And that therefore means more memory, more at work for the animators, basically. But also then if you hit a limit, if you sort of say, well, we have too many sprites, because it all has to be loaded into memory and da-da-da-da. If you have too many, then you say, all right, actually, well, we'll reduce the number of steps so it will have more, big jumps between it. And then when you look at it as a player, you just see it sort of jumping around and it looks awful, you see. So they've basically got to balance up size, meaning more required steps in the turn, and the practicality basically of how much memory they can use. And because you imagine if you've got 10 of them on screen, you've got even more animations going on all at the same time, and it just becomes more and more complicated, more and more stuff. Because you could have, as we say, we've got green ones, gold ones, red ones, we've got 3 different levels. At the very least, that's 9 different creatures. The tiny ones, you would be able to get away with fewer, but the big guys, and both of 2 of them are big guys, are going to need even more animation steps in order to not look janky. We have some leggy tech from Spidertrons, so it made sense to try to use that on at least one of the new large enemies. That was the starting point for the design that ended up being the pentapods. There are a lot of different ways you could go with a leggy enemy. At the start, we didn't know which enemies would go where, so I was sketching all sorts of weird and wonderful things because the design space was so huge. There are a lot of aesthetic and game mechanics considerations along the way, but to give an example, leggy enemies didn't have pathfinding, so they couldn't be on a planet with large obstacles like a lava lake, which they can't step over. They actually do have pathfinding now. And here we see some of the early concepts. This is clearly at a stage where they've decided on, a 5-leg design, and it says early Stomper concept before settling on starfish ancestry. So these really don't look like any kind of starfish that I would have ever seen. They look like they've got more like a sort of proper head to them, whereas the later designs don't. But you notice we're getting all sorts of biological gloopy things, but it all looks armoured, so it looks like it's an invertebrate with a carapace and armour around it. The pentapods are loosely based on something like sea stars being a distant ancestor and then being very heavily evolved beyond that starting point. Sea stars have an endoskeleton made up of many small plates, and that's really useful for something designed to lift its body off the ground. Sea stars are related to urchins, which have a dome-shaped shell, and that is useful for the head or central body section of the creature. The legs should be indistinguishable for performance reasons, so that forces some rotational symmetry for the whole body. What that just means is that each leg is identical. Okay, so each leg is not drawn separately. They're not actually separate things. So when you see this here, this is the same single leg set. It's just you're seeing different angle versions of it, if you see what I mean. So they don't have to draw and design and what have you completely separate legs with completely separate structures. It's just the same leg spawned in 5 times essentially, and you can kind of see that because it has the same like nodules and bumps on every single leg, and that's because it's the same leg just repeated round, where you might expect through natural variation, it would have different moles or different lumps or what have you on each of your different, legs. It doesn't. It's identical, and they're just, putting 5 of them in, and that therefore means they can just have one and put it in 5 times. We found rotation symmetry didn't work for the upper body. For combat, it was important to have the enemy clearly show its targeting direction, and that means the head should have directionality to it and look at the target with something like a face. So in other words, if the body or headpiece was just completely, amorphous, you couldn't tell what direction it was looking at, you couldn't really do the combat. It was too difficult to work out what's it looking at, what's it going to attack, etc., etc., where's it going in particular, without some kind of eye or other structure to show what direction it's looking at. And that's why these are basically single piece. Got 2 horns on the side here, and it's got a bunch of eyes. Yeah, so it's got a direction. It looks in a direction, basically. Another thing that's not mentioned here, just to note, to me these look quite crabby. They look quite like crustaceans. Not so much on the other ones. These are perhaps more like insects. But these guys look quite like crabs to me. So just an image here with some early concepts. It just says early Strafer concepts before settling on starfish ancestry. So again, these are the ones where they've decided on 5 legs. They've got the concept of the Strafer, I guess, but they're not meant to look like starfish, or evolved from starfish. However, the eye thing is going on. Erendel is clearly a fan of disgusting things that trigger my trypophobia, because these random blobby things and random holes in things is basically what trypophobia is. It's a disgust, a fear reaction to that sort of randomized holes and blobs and things like that. And so these guys, for me, I find them particularly disgusting. They're obviously horrible, no matter who you are, I think. But the whole random eye blob thing is just, a real trigger for me. To do this, I designed the head or dome section of the creature to be evolved from a state where it had lots of holes. The holes on one side evolved to be light sensitive and became eyes. The holes on the other side deepened to become more like a sponge to increase air surface area and increase respiration potential. Muscles can squeeze the sponge area to let the creature actively breathe and grow to even larger sizes. It's interesting Erendel mentions that. You get a lot of horror films where there's like giant insects and things like that. They're basically impossible. There's a there's like physics reasons in the sense that they would collapse under their own weight. But fundamentally, how insects breathe is that they do gas exchange, so they do the breathing action, exchanging carbon dioxide, oxygen in their blood, that type of thing. But they do it through a passive way, and they have these spiracles, which are basically holes, essentially. And what happens is their natural movement, as they move, it like forces air in and out, basically. And also you just get general drift of molecules about, will cause the gas exchange. But essentially they don't actively breathe, so they don't breathe in and out. And so what you get with insects is there's essentially a limit where the distance into the animal that the spiracles can go is limited, because the amount of passive, force, as it were, that can push the air in and out and the breath out, as it were, is quite limited. And that's why you have to be an active breather. So you have to have lungs or some form of system for exchange, forcing air in and out of your system in order to be bigger, basically. So everything that's big has to have a lung, because it doesn't have any other way, or something equivalent to a lung. It doesn't have any other way of moving air about, basically, because if you go with this type of system of just a hole where gas exchange happens, then air can only get in so far, even with your movement pushing air in and out. And so it's interesting Arundel mentions that, because that would be a limitation. These guys couldn't actually get big unless they've got some way of actively breathing. And if they're based on some form of invertebrate type animal, it probably doesn't have a lung system. It doesn't have an active breathing system. And so the idea he's come up with is that it has developed one, and the holes, which would have probably been its spiracles that it would have done its gas exchange for, are then augmented by a muscle system that actively pushes the air in and out. So it's interesting the sort of detail he goes to sometimes. The wings are based on these same sorts of holes, but the surface is sealed so it can be inflated with air like a balloon. Originally, in the hypothetical evolutionary process, these could have been used as a flotation assistant, but they then would have evolved into inflated crests like a Portuguese man-of-war, and then into a shape that helps with gliding and aerial control while young. In the strafer phase of the life cycle, they'd be used as an expressive signalling device, but later in life, as the exterior shell hardens, the winglets would be lost. So yeah, basically the idea appears to be that part of these holes in the shell, some of them would have sort of a covering over, and that it would be able to inflate them. They would have a membrane over them, and it would be able to inflate them and use them either as later on, wings, or just a thing to basically be blown about with. And it's interesting, of course, the mention of the Portuguese man-of-war. When we saw the Gribbly alien, all the way back in the day, and I don't know if it was just one of the concepts that contributed to this, and we're not actually going to get that enemy, but it did, I've said, look partly like a Portuguese man-of-war with its sort of head structure, and that's basically what this thing on the top is. It's like a sail, basically, so it allows the creature to be blown around the ocean. It doesn't have a way of actively controlling it as such, I don't believe, but basically it uses that light to be pushed around and therefore cover a greater surface area. So it feeds on mollusks and fish, basically. So the idea is that by drifting around, it covers more air, more volume, basically, and it can interact with more fish, more mollusks, and it's got really deadly like toxins in its sting, and therefore it then digests that prey. So you can it's the type of thing you can imagine evolving into an active form of movement. By being able to steer itself, if it developed that capability, it could then go to the places with more concentrations of animals, you see, and that's a very typical evolutionary type process. But yeah, so it's interesting that Arundel's thinking at that sort of level, really. And so Arundel's even come up with this sort of generalised, biological structure. I will read this out because some of it's a little difficult to read, but the caption just says, generalised anatomy of Gleba enemies. So we have the purple sections here on the outside here are harder shell, and they've got identification of veins, so it's got a circulatory system. It's then got, I assume, a heart per leg, so this heart here, I assume it's not a circular heart that goes round, it's a heart per leg. We've then got a nervous system which goes up to a brain. and the eye is connected directly to the brain. This is just called the head plate. We've then got wing and spit muscles. So when it has those wings, there is a musculature system that flaps the wings, basically, or can control the wings. Although they're called wings, they're more like a gliding thing, and we'll kind of get onto that. Basically, it's more like, say, the ability to steer how it's being, thrown, essentially, rather than it's not flapping its wings to fly, I don't think. But then basically that evolves, or that changes as it grows, into a way of spitting. So the contractions that would be doing the wing control become the spitter, basically, and that's what this is here, the ejector. It actually spits, apparently, out of the top, which means that it's pooping on us, basically, because the mouth is at the bottom. Okay, so the thing feeds clearly by sitting down onto whatever it's eating. It's then got a grinder, which would be the equivalent of its teeth, a stomach, where clearly the material would ferment and be absorbed in digestive juices type of thing, and then it's got a fermenter. Now, a fermenter would be where fermentation takes place. It would be, I guess, the equivalent on us of the bowels, basically, where you lower your intestines, your large and small intestine, and then the ejector must therefore be where it excretes waste material. Okay, so it poops out the top of its head, essentially, and if it's spitting at us, that's what it's spitting. So what pentapods are doing, actually, when they spit at us, is pooing at us. So they are ejecting their poop at us. Okay, and then on the back here, which is this idea, as I say, it's got more like a directionality to its head side, and so this is the lung where it can do its gas exchange, and so this would be all muscled, you would expect, and it's also where it's obviously got its reproductive system in some way. How it reproduces, obviously, we don't know, and I wouldn't even want to speculate, whether it's asexual and it's just essentially spawning copies of itself, or it has some kind of genetic exchange, shall we say, some sort of thing. You could imagine that happening potentially. It'd be interesting to see them mating, is basically the point. Yes, so that's the sort of generalised anatomy, and you can imagine that working in each of the things, and these, like Wrigglers, have more sort of segments in their shells, and perhaps it's underneath the skin, like the endoskeleton, and it all sort of, just as it grows, it evolves. It changes into these different structures. One would assume, therefore, that it's like a molting creature, that it would, shed a skin, basically, because that tends to be the pattern with non-spinal type creatures, in that their bone structures, their exoskeletons, tend to be fixed, essentially, and so to grow, they have to shed them, they have to get rid of them. Now, because it's talked about as an endoskeleton, maybe it doesn't, and maybe it just grows with the creature, it lays down more and more bone type material and just gets bigger. But yeah, so it's a level of detail that I personally really appreciate. It's sort of, I'll be honest, it was one of the things I'm going to talk about maybe in my enemies video. I don't know what I'm going to do about that video now. The life cycle of the biters doesn't really make sense. There isn't really a sense thing to it. It doesn't make sense as a way of a creature that would exist, type of thing. And so it's nice that Arundel is kind of thinking a bit more about that. And it doesn't matter. This is the type of stuff that doesn't matter, but is great fun for me to think about. And it's just interesting that, Arundel is going to the trouble of doing that and giving them a bit of a life cycle, bit of a way of working, bit of a reason for what they're doing. And hopefully, maybe there'll be a bit of retconning of that in for the biters. But yeah, we'll have to see. Their mouth is at the bottom of the body. At the top of their head is their multi-purpose hole, which is connected to a final fermentation chamber and the last stage of digestion. The creatures produce eggs internally and either spew the eggs into a shallow water, forming the egg raft, or they keep some eggs to hatch internally, where the hatchlings can get to the fermentation chamber. The internally hatched young can then be spat at food sources or at threats, which are often also food sources, so that they can be grappled and consumed. Now, whether they come out of the ejector in both cases, I don't know, but if you look, the the exit for the egg chambers is actually into the fermentation chamber. So I guess you could imagine that they would drop off into the, and form the rafts, but it feels more like they all come out of there, and occasionally it'll do a big poop with a load of eggs in it, and that'll be the raft. But it'll also keep a few in there that it can then spit poop at the anything it wants to attack, or that could be a food source for its young, basically. And that the idea is that this is then a predatory creature, and it's basically firing its young at the things that those creatures can eat. And presumably, if you think it through, because it's a stompy enemy and it can obviously spit things, but if it gets up there and stomps on something and like breaks its legs, it could then spit at it, and then you've got a captive but alive food source for its young, so it could have that type of life cycle. Next we got then a picture of some early concepts, as it says here, early flyer missile concepts. These were 6 possible designs for the flyer enemy, which is also obviously the Wriggler enemy. There's a range of things going on here. I mean, some of them look quite like dragonflies. Others look more like sort of like heads, I suppose, or something like that. This one looks particularly like a lotus head, like a lotus plant, and it's interesting. It's jetting out gases here. That would be more of a propelled. That's something that's pushing itself in a particular direction by ejecting gases, whereas these look more like, they could fly, in terms of flapping their wings, but more like a glider style, that it's just using it to control where it is and its orientation, etc., etc. So yeah, some interesting designs. You also see some commonality between them. So this is like what if this type of design, so this one here and this one here, and more like what if this type of design had actual active thrusters on it, basically. In the lore for these creatures, their behaviour, egg incubation strategy and global population control is linked to them being very tribal creatures, where nearby unrelated tribes are considered to be enemies competing for resources. It would be nice to have all of that simulated in the game, but doing so would be terrible for performance and not improve gameplay. So you just have to imagine that stuff going on in the background. So yeah, the idea is that these are locally territorial tribal animals. So other creatures that are in their tribe that are related to them, they will not attack, but those that aren't, they will attack. If they want more territory, whatever, they'll attack each other and try and kill each other. If they're fighting with each other, then it would be great for that to be in the game, but why? It doesn't really do anything for the player. They just get enemies killing each other. And since it's the nests, I guess, that you would want to get the eggs from, and they're the bit that matters, would you have them killing each other's nests and then you could harvest them? It all sounds very complicated and very performance heavy. So I can fully understand why that's gone. But if you think about it in a headcanon sense, that these are territorial creatures and they'll attack each other and defend, when attacked and all that sort of stuff, then it makes a lot more sense of an ecosystem, And then we got a picture showing them all, and it says concept art for the Gleba family. Initially, we were going for more of a translucent look, but we couldn't overcome some layering problems caused by transparent, overlapped sprites. Instead, we went with rougher shells and rubbery bodies. So yeah, there they are. And these are the concept art versions. And then the next picture, which we'll skip to right now instead of kind of reading the text, we'll come back to that. But these are the in-game versions, okay? And it says the Gleba family with near-final textures, but before the evolution tier tints, green, gold, red. That's where I got the whole, there's 3 levels to them. They go through the green, gold and red. These don't have any tints on them whatsoever. So they would then be more green, which is why this guy is green. So the tint is applied. And then obviously similar with the other ones that, they're green and gold. As I said on the images before, some of them look different as well. So I don't know if they're variants, or this one here looking different in a sense, but being bigger. So I wonder if that's a gold one, and it's really just a retexture, but it's a bit bigger. A bit like biters, where they get bigger as they go up the levels. Again, I repeat the call for an art book. I would really like an art book. But I think this is a case. So a lot of the ones before where we've been seeing the concept images, it's been a sort of like, well, I'd love to play with those, concept graphics in the game. I'm not sure that's the case here. I mean, these look amazing. There's not a negative in any way against these, but these look phenomenal, don't they? I mean, as real things, real enemies for you to combat and fight and see moving around in the game, you can't really beat the whole 3D thing that they do, I think. While the concept art, as I say, is awesome, not saying anything against it, I think as actual things moving around that you want to attack and kill and defend yourself from, these just look amazing. And particularly this big guy, that just looks awesome. The sort of texture to it, and it does look like a creature that has got a hardened exoskeleton on it. It looks like a real thing. I, meaning Arundel, not me, created the concept art for all the Gleba enemies, egg-raft spawners, and spawning foam with input from Albert and V. Towards the end of the concept art phase, I made 3D sculptures of the Stomper and Strafer, which were close to the final versions. From there, Fergal took the sculptures, added the finer details and texturing, then cut them up for rigging. At the start, we were hoping the graphics could be done in the same way as the Spidertron legs, but of course, things were not so simple. The enemy legs are much thicker and move over a wider range of angles, so it revealed all the problems in the old lighting setup. The rigging setup to get both good lighting and good projection angles required more serious mental gymnastics from Fergal, along with multiple of us trying to help him along the way. The Wriggler uses classic sprite sheets like biters, so in most ways that process is a lot simpler, but it does require some hand animation instead of procedural animation. For those, Fergal gave the models to Jersey so that he could bring them to life with their iconic wriggles. As usual, all the sound effects were done by Ian and music by Peter. Even though the intention was to just use the systems we already had, we uncovered a range of problems with the old animation systems along the way. Inevitably, more work was required on the leggy enemy Spidertron system to get them working well for this use case. Thanks to a lot of upgrades by StrangePan, we can now have these wonderful creatures and some Spidertron improvements too. Interesting. Conclusion. The enemies are still subject to change, and some things are still missing, like final sound effects for the larger versions. We also have more combat balancing to do so that combat can be interesting in the right ways and not punishing. Right now, they are fun to fight, especially if you're slightly underpowered, because it feels like your actions, movement and target priority matter more. They certainly feel very different from biters. Yeah, it actually sounds like you might need to have tactics, rather than just holding spacebar and firing at the enemies, basically. Seems like tactics might be involved. Who do you pick off first, and how do you get at these guys, and all sorts of stuff like that. At the moment, there are 3 tiers of Pentapod. The combat video only shows the green small tier, which are much weaker. The largest tier are especially devastating, but at least in most cases, they only trample your agricultural area and not your main processing area, so it's easier to recover. As always, stomp around the usual places and fling your undeveloped thoughts at us. I think this is going to be a bit of a mammoth speculation one, I'm afraid. Well, I'm not afraid, it's great, but it could take a while to get through this. Let's start with the obvious. The general design. Absolutely love it, as I think was probably obvious during the actual read-through. The only little thing I would say, and I don't think it needs addressing, don't think it's really a problem, is if you look at this guy's feet, they do seem to sort of judder between the different animations. It's very, very small. And the legs kind of carry it in a sense, but if you look at its feet, they do sort of jump between what are clearly relatively big steps. So when I was doing that concentric circles thing, the idea being that they're jumps basically between fairly distant points, but it's very, very minor, and it's not something I think matters as such. And I love that they have a clear like growth path in a sense, that these are the juveniles, these are the intermediates, and these are the final, and that Arundel has put this much thought into it, of what their life cycle is, how they feed, how they live, all of that sort of stuff. I just love that Arundel's gone to that level of detail, and as I say, I really hope it gets kind of retconned into the biters as well. Maybe that we get a new biter on Nalvis and it kind of ties it together a bit better, or there's some tweak to the behaviour that makes a little bit more sense, or there's a new enemy on Nalvis maybe. I don't actually think any of that will be there because it just feels too, like too much in a sense. But I'm just hoping that maybe there's a little bit more, going on there. And it could even be, I'm not going to say all the stuff I was going to say in my enemies video. I'll have to see if I can rework that and get it to work, basically. But yeah, I just love that this level of detail that they're going to, and that it kind of makes sense as an ecosystem, And the other thing, of course, I guess to note on that is that, they do feel, there feels like there's similarities to biters, but they do feel quite distinct, So you've got actual behaviour from these guys that's different from how biters behave. These appear to basically just work like small biters. They just run at you and attack you, by trying to bite you. They're sort of a melee biting type attack. It mentions claws and stuff like that. So these do feel quite similar to the current enemies, whereas these guys look, very different. There is a lot of similarity to the Spidertron, and it makes it very clear in the code that that's how they've done it. But as a thing looking like it, it's a Spidertron that's missing a leg, so it's not massively out of context of what's in the game already. Oh, the other little note I had on the design, I absolutely adore the knee pads. So if you look at these guys, they have like a bulbous one, so it's got like a thing. It's obviously clearly hiding like a connection point for the animation, but I absolutely adore these little knee pads that it's got. So this guy's obviously got small ones, and then this one's got chonking great knee pads on it. Basically it's I don't know, it's just very sort of silly in a sense. It works, it makes sense, and I say it's clearly just hiding like a connection point for the animations, but yeah, I just really I really adore these little knee pads that they've got on. One of the things that does lead on to then is the question of, is this where we get Spidertron? Is essentially, because what seems to be slightly happening with a lot of the planets and stuff, where they've moved things away from Nalvis, or they've introduced things, there seems to be a bit of a tying up of what is the mechanic on the planet, how does the engineer adapt that? So we've just seen recently the Tesla turret coming in, and this is where my idea came from. You've got lightning on the planet, that's your threat. The engineer harnesses that lightning both in terms of using it for power, and we're going to use the biological stuff on Gleba to do things. So he's harnessing it in the sense of using it as a material, as a resource, but also then weaponizing it. So turning lightning into a lightning turret, turning the spidery type creature into a Spidertron would make some sense. But I think it's more about, this is, although the engineer has missiles by the time they arrive here, they've already got a missile launcher, the idea of, right, well, this is an enemy that I need to hit from long range, it will stand outside of the range of my laser turrets and gun turrets. I need to take missiles, which I've already got, and fire them from a fixed emplacement. That's why the engineer is inventing the missile turret. So it's very closely related. And of course this guy effectively is, an enemy with a missile turret on it, like a Spidertron. So then thinking, oh well, then the engineer thinks, well, why don't I do my version of this creature that I saw on this planet and turn it into a useful tool for me? And it's just taking the themes, the concepts, the ideas, and turning them into useful things. Now, I don't think Spidertron will actually be on Gleba. I think it will be a proper endgame technology that you need, as I said in my video, that you will need the black science, whichever one it is, the dark blue science, the infinite science from the final planet in order to build it. And if not that one, then all of the regular sciences. You will need all three from the intermediate sciences plus possibly the Aquila one in order to research Spidertron, because it's like a super technology thing. But I don't think it will require exclusive resources, other than the fact that the turret could well require something that's only on Gleba. But that's kind of rehashing my video point. The basic point though is that there's a bit of a thing going on of, well, this is what the enemy does, I'm going to adapt that. And so the fact that this has a missile launcher on it is basically saying that's the idea, that's why Spidertron has got its missile launcher. And effectively, when the engineer is saying, right, well, I've built this missile turret, hang on, why don't I do what that enemy was doing, stick it on a bunch of legs and have it walk around, basically. So that's, where it comes from, but that technology to do that is later down the line. And it, specifically states that the rocket turret is on Gleba. Okay, so I think that's kind of what, one of the things that's going on with the design, essentially. The other thing to note is that on this there is actually a Spidertron. So one of the clues that this could be where Spidertron is unlocked is that on this map, if we zoom right in, and we'll come back to this as well, but this here is clearly a Spidertron. Okay, so this could be later in the game. They could have gone to it first. It's a very, very tiny base, I would say, for something that is meant to be endgame or something like that. But then we don't know how productive these things are. But yeah, there is a Spidertron here. So I don't know if that is a sort of a clue that actually Spidertron is unlocked on Gleba, and so the engineer has made it, basically. It would make sense, I'm not saying it isn't. It's just I feel it probably a bit later in the tech tree, It's very powerful to give you Spidertron on Gleba, which could be the reason to go there. You can get it straight away. So before we dive into the combat properly, if these guys are meant to be like the level 1, and there's level 2 and level 3, then, these are still pretty tough. The Wrigglers appear to be fairly, mild in this form. They just die to a few bullets, basically. But when you get into what they call Strafers, it takes a couple of rockets to kill them, which is not, not a small amount of damage. Rockets are pretty effective. A couple of rockets is like a spawner on Malvis. So, that's not for a level 1. If that's the equivalent of a small biter, that level of threat, then that's quite a lot to kill. A single one of those, and it looks like maybe they hang up more in groups. And then, of course, the big guy, the Stompy boy. This takes a lot to kill. The laser beams, if you look at it when it's happening, are basically almost continuous. They only switch away when it's got a Wriggler to kill that's come in, and is firing his submachine gun quite a lot. I'm assuming because of the story that was being told, that it's meant to be lower ammo, that you've not actually got that much, so it's a bit more firing, when best. But then it takes a lot of flame damage, This flamer coming in here, I think, and say it's been hit by lasers continuously for a minute. It's been hit by a lot of gunfire, and then it takes a load of flamer attack, and it is on fire here. Yeah, I don't know if you can see that underneath, for it to die, and it's still being hit by lasers. Do you know what I mean? So, and that's level 1. So these things are tough, and that's what we were expecting from what we were hinted at. But yeah, it's going to be phenomenal to see what the red guys are like. And just to note, the red guys, although they're not in any of the Friday Facts, and as I said, pointed out, we could see maybe what I think are probably gold ones for the Wrigglers and the Strafers. Strafers is not a name that drops off my tongue, I'm afraid. But I think this is the red guy. So this is the full-on, fully evolved, max level Stomper, basically. And so this is the red one, because it goes green, gold, red. And so this is your max level 1. So it doesn't really look any different. It might be bigger, I suspect it is, because looking at the scale of that to that compared to, if we compare, say, the head shape there with that, then they're about the same size. If we look at this one, that looks only about maybe half the size of that. So I think maybe the idea is that as they go up these levels, very much like biters, they get bigger and bigger. And if these are the bits of flora and fauna knocking about, I think this is much bigger. So I think maybe they go up a bit like biters, where you get small, you medium, you big, and as they go up, they get physically bigger, as well as getting tougher, more resistances, more dangerous attacks, etc., etc. So I wouldn't be surprised if the red level, you need something like a Spidertron to take on, but of course they're very much end game enemies. They're the equivalent of behemoths, basically. So on the combat front, it basically says that they're fairly passive. and that they would defend their nests. They defend their nests and attack you if you attack a nearby ally, but otherwise they will leave you alone at first. So the implication to that, to me, is when it says defend their nests, it means you have to attack their nests. In passive mode, if you've never played in that mode, the biters will completely ignore you, essentially. They will just walk around, you can stand next to them, you can stand next to spawners. They will do nothing about you until you attack. And then every biter within the radius will just, instantly be aggroed on you. They will attack you, they will keep attacking you until, hopefully, from their point of view, they've killed you or you've killed them. I'm assuming it means the same thing, that you could effectively walk up to these guys and they would not attack you. The difficulty, though, is that doesn't mesh with the video. If you look at the video, the engineer walks up, but already this Wriggler is coming in to attack. Yeah? So that, to me, is not defending the nests. That's attacking the player getting near the nests, which is identical behaviour to biters. So it's difficult to know what they mean by the fairly passive thing. It doesn't sound like it's exactly the same as passive mode. I'm guessing the kind of real meaning is more that unless you get within that attack radius, they won't come and attack you. So they're not going to respond to pollution in the same way that biters do. Okay, so they will not come in and aggressively attack all of your structures if you generate enough pollution to draw them over. What they would do is try and eat your plants. So if there's radars or what have you, they will not come and attack them directly. The Stomper may accidentally destroy stuff, maybe, just as it's walking around. That was one of the things I was speculating. It sounds like maybe that isn't how it works. If you're harvesting these things for the eggs, you will run out, basically. So if you clear out all this area of these guys, then if they don't spawn new ones, don't make new nests, then you would be stuck eventually. I mean, I guess with the scale of the game, that it's going to be near infinite or effectively infinite, it wouldn't be a problem. You would eventually be able to find some. And of course, you've got this mechanism for growing your own aliens. But yes, there is this sort of risk that if they don't spawn, you could run out of them. I therefore think they will spawn new ones, but the point will be they will not aggressively spawn. So if they plop something down, they're not going to, if they come and try to colonize this sea here, they will just colonize it. They won't, attack your stuff when they move past it, or, actively attack any of your things, any of your structures, unless they get attacked. So if they wander past a set of turrets and are attacked, then they will respond to that, but otherwise they're passive. I think that's probably more likely how it will work because of, the need to keep a fresh supply close to the player. But yeah, so I say it's a little unclear because of this video whether it means passive like passive mode, and I suspect not. I suspect it's that if you get close to them, they will attack. Otherwise, they won't come and actively attack you. They won't respond to pollution in quite the same way. And if they colonize, they will just colonize and only attack if they're attacked. When they, if they get close to something that will attack them, basically. I think that's a good choice. I think the idea of being able to land and basically being free of enemies, because this whole thing that they don't colonize, they only colonize the shallow seas. Yeah, so they're only going to spawn in these areas. Obviously, I'm guessing they would pass across, they would go between them. Maybe not. Maybe once you've cleared out a lake, it's basically denuded, But the idea that there are safe areas for you to build that you don't really have to worry about is interesting. I would imagine this whole mechanic of coming and eating your fruit will work, go against that you couldn't build all of that in safe areas. So we know we have to build it on the shallow sea, so you can't build it up on the mountains or what have you. But of course, they say if you cleared out this lake and you put it in the middle of the lake, then unless there's some respawning mechanic, they're only going to come and just eat it. So if pollution hit all the way out here and your nest was hit, your growth, your agriculture was here, then they would walk across and eat it. But unless they have a a spawning mechanic, a making new eggs thing, they're not going to recolonize that lake, which is why, as I say, I think they will. And I think it will be a literal spawning thing. So I think these globules of eggs will be something that the medium and big guys, the strafers and the stompers will actually spawn. They will sit there, a bit like biters come in and spawn new spawners and worms. I think these guys will do the same. They will drop these eggs, and that's how you can harvest more if you run out. What I'm sort of getting at, why you would need to refresh it, is that if the mechanic is that the ones that you grow could hatch, you could run out, basically. So if the idea is that you have to, stick them in a biochamber, you can turn 1 into 5, and then you can loop round and you can build up more and more. If all of those hatch, you've then got no way of growing more, basically, unless they come out of nothing, essentially. So if your recipe is that you can put nutrients into a biochamber that's been primed with eggs, and it will spawn infinite eggs, but it would never run out of eggs, that doesn't feel very Factorio, then you would be okay. But if it's a case that, a bit like Covrex or something, where you've got to take it out and then put it back in again, you could be unlucky, and then it basically, all of your eggs are gone, and you've got no way of restarting it without going and getting more of them. And that's why I think it needs a respawning mechanic. Okay, so the combat then. So obviously the Wrigglers appear to be basically biters. They rush up, they rush into melee range and try and bite you basically. It gets more interesting when we get to the medium guys. I quite like this mechanic that once you've killed a nest, it pops and a load of them come out. That offers the opportunity for more. If the less, the egg rafts rather do get bigger, they could have more and more of the Wrigglers in them. We don't actually see it here, we can't see it spawning them, but as I say, the egg mechanic is back, basically, so alien artifacts are back. When we get into the territory of, where is it? So this strafing guy here, this is where it gets much more tactically interesting, because you've got then an enemy that is deliberately trying to stay out of range. Okay, so it sounds like they have target fixation. So in other words, they will if they aggro on you, they will focus on you until you are dead. Okay, and what you could therefore do is having a turret safe area is going to be a good thing to do, because you can basically run past it, and that will draw the strafer to you, and it will get wiped out by your turret. So having a little area where you've set up some turrets will be good. It begs the question of how resistant they are to gun damage, because obviously the only turret we have that is unpowered, that's not true, is it? The flamer's unpowered, flameflower's unpowered, but the main turret that we have that is unpowered is the gun turret. So are they particularly resistant to bullet damage, particularly the higher levels, and that would therefore make that a bad choice for an encampment. Flamers, obviously, are they particularly resistant, to that? This guy does resist a lot of flame damage, the big Stompy boy. So maybe they're all a bit resistant to fire, maybe. But the other problem with flamer turrets, of course, is they're very directional. And, of course, you've got to get oil into them. And we've not actually seen any evidence that there is oil on Gleba. We're not actually seeing any evidence that there's coal, what have you. We've seen solid fuel on Gleba, so there must be some way of making that stuff. But it could be a recipe that the biochamber has. It doesn't necessarily need to be an oil-based recipe. So, yeah, that could be a restriction for using flamers, that you need to import it, basically, and therefore personal flamer is the only really option you've got. And how you deal with lots of them would be quite tricky. Essentially, as I say, while we are getting flying enemies. Let's see if I can find one. Here we go. So there's some of them coming in there. They're more like the missiles. They seem to have the same homing behaviour that our missiles have. I'm just going to refer to things as missiles. I said in my combat video, the use of the term rocket is a bit confusing, because there's the big rocket you put in space. So yeah, I think it's basically more like these are gliders, and that they're fired and they glide in, and they do. They don't have any way of themselves launching themselves into the air. So in other words, they have to come out of one of these guys. That's their only way of flying, and that they are essentially thrown, spat, pooped at you. And when they attack, what they do is they basically home in on you like our missiles, and they hit you. That causes you damage. Then they drop down to being a normal Wriggler, and then they can attack you in a melee way. And they can't then jump back into the air. Okay, so once they're on the ground, basically. So they're more like gliders than self-propelled things. It does make it An interesting thing, though, is this the only flying enemy we're going to get? Are there going to be other flying enemies? We'll come back to the mention of lots of enemies later on. And then Big Stompy Boy. So it's a little bit of a shame that this is at night. We can obviously see it better when it's burning, when it's in fire. But yes, the idea then of this being a melee enemy that it's basically they've stuck a spitter and a biter together. So it comes in and it can do a spit attack at you. It can spit at you, but it can also do a physical attack. In this case, a stomp. What I think is missing, and what I would love them to add, but also not love them to add, and it may be why they haven't put it in, is there's no stun effect. So when it stamps on you in this video, I can't see any evidence that it stuns the player. It is a little difficult to tell what the stomp attacks are because the sound effect is missing, I think. I think that's one of the ones that's not there. I'm assuming there'll be a great big bang when it hits, You can see the splash of it like hitting a few times. I can't find one. No, can't get it. Basically, you can see it, like debris flies up and stuff like that, but it doesn't appear to do any stun effect on the player. So the player can just keep going, obviously taking in the damage, and it sounds like it's effectively like a grenade as well. It does an area of effect type damage, and presumably, therefore, if it was being shot by turrets, it would come in, stomp one of the ones in the middle, and they are, several on the other side would get damaged, if not destroyed. There is also this mention, as it's, in the actual text, that they can step over walls. So we have an enemy with height, even without the flying effect, and that walls essentially are a bit useless because the Wrigglers can be thrown, by the other enemies or kind of spawn by them. And so they can get inside your walls anyway. Okay, so walls I'm sure are useful when you've got a big wave of them coming in and they're very high damage, and the Wrigglers are trying to attack your turrets. Walls are still going to be useful there, but as a mainstay of your defense, they're a bit less useful, which is good. This is getting into this point I made in my combat video about a rock paper scissors type of thing, where you need to think of different strategies and different ways of dealing things for different enemies on different planets. Oh yeah, I guess I didn't mention as well the idea that these guys, the long legs, the strafers, try and keep their distance is going to make it really interesting tactically to deal with them, especially when you get lots of everything going on. Your late game, it's difficult to deal with Wrigglers, so they're coming in and biting you. These guys are lobbing them in from a distance, even more of them, and then a big Stompy Boy turns up and starts stamping on you as well. We haven't necessarily seen whether it can damage, do friendly fire. That would be an interesting thing, because then you could maybe kite it to one of them and get it to stamp on them. But yes, so the fact that these guys are at distance, so you have to target them with missiles, but you don't want to, waste all your missiles on sending them over, on killing them. And if you've got quite a few of them, and you've got, say a big stompy one that you could be hitting with missiles in a sense by accident, and you're sort of wasting them compared to taking these guys out quicker, could make things a lot more tactically interesting. It does make me wonder what happens with tanks and cars and things like that. Will a stomp, how much damage does a stomp do? Is it just going to destroy a tank basically, or what really? The interaction with vehicles and Spidertron, given that Spidertron, it can technically be, damaged by melee, the biters can chomp on its legs essentially. So how does that, is it safer from a stomper? Is it not quite as affected by the stomping damage? These are all sorts of questions that it's going to be interesting to find out. Oh, and I guess the other thing on that point is that, how much damage does this attack do? This player is clearly got a lot of late game stuff on. It looks like it's wearing Mark II armour, I think. It's a little difficult to tell, especially at this quality level. But it's certainly got at least 2 lasers on. One would imagine a couple of shields. Therefore, it's probably using the fusion reactor, the fission reactor or the fusion reactor. The personal one. Don't know. Looks like maybe the attack that's being done the attacks that are being done are basically benefiting from several combat buffs. We don't know, basically. We can't see any of the UI, we can't see any of the shields, we can't see any of the weapon stuff. It could have uranium, they could have uranium arrow. Don't know. So it feels like the player is actually quite high level in this combat. If you get stomped, do you have to have 2 shields on and what have you in order to survive? What's the damage limit on that? Because if it is that sort of scale, it's going to make tackling them without that gear really hard. Because you are kind of in the territory of single hit kill. If you're turning up and you've got just normal heavy armor or something, and you get hit, are you dead, basically? One of the things, the other things that occurs to me with the big Stompy boy is there's a sort of a Dark Souls element to it, where it's almost like because he can't turn, there's a bit of an advantage of getting in close. You run the risk then of being stomped on, but you can get in there and attack it, in a safer way if you are close. Because they've said very specifically that it's faster than you, even when you've got legs on. And presumably that means legendary legs as well. That this thing, particularly I would imagine at the level 3, is super quick and you cannot outrun it. You cannot run away. You can obviously kite it into turrets, but you can't run away. And so you then get into a bit of a Dark Souls-y thing of basically it's better to run up and stab it in the bum, basically. It's better to attack it from close range inside its attack radius, and because it can't turn, it can't then, position its legs in order to stomp on you. But it's got a spit attack, so it has a short range way of attacking you even then, you see. So it feels like it's getting into a Dark Souls-y territory, because the tactic with almost every Dark Souls boss seems to basically be avoid all the attacks and then get in there and stab it in the bum, basically. One of the things that does therefore beg is the question of maybe we will get a melee weapon. You can technically do melee damage at the moment, of basically if you have no weapons, when you attack something, you will punch it, so you can, punch nests and stuff like that. It's incredibly ineffective. But it does make me wonder, you remember we saw the grabby arm thing, which could be a new power armor. Is there going to be essentially a melee power armor, and that actually the best way of dealing with these guys that you wouldn't expect is to run in there and literally just punch it in the bum? I kind of don't think we'll get that, but I found it amusing to think about. It does mention about sort of balancing the combat and how tricky that's going to be, and I did discuss it during the main body of the video. But this idea that you could turn up at Gleba and have basically very little military science, and it's your first planet you're going to, or you could turn up at the end where you've done all of the other planets as much as you can. You've got all of your buffs and you've got all of your equipment. You've been running quality stuff for ages with level 3 quality modules, and you've got max gear basically. You've got a load of Tesla turrets, you've got whatever Toughness gives us, and so those are very different starting points for Gleba, and to some degree I guess it's fine, in a sense that you could turn up there and be OP basically because you've done all the other stuff. I don't know that that's necessarily a problem, but it does mean it renders it pointless, when you even start there. One of the things they seem to be trying to do is have the starting point be a bit higher, a bit more difficult than Novice. Another way would be to have a kind of level scaling. So in a bit like some RPGs use, where, Bethesda's very keen on this way of doing it. Basically, as you level up, the enemies level up. So as you become level 20, they become level, their range of levels becomes 10 to 30. As you become level 40, it goes from 30 to 60. That they keep a range in there, but it scales upwards as you scale up. And how that could work is that you could have the base damage, the base health for these guys scaling based on what you've actually achieved. So it would have to be fairly hard locked, I think. It would basically be a sort of, have you unlocked this technology on Volcanus? Right, well, we add 10 points of health to every enemy on Gleba. And you could do that, of course, across all the planets. And so then basically when you get to Gleba, it's not that they've been evolving in the background without you being there, and you arrive and it's impossible to beat them. It's more that if the question is, right, well, has this player unlocked Tesla turrets, yes, okay, well, we'll make the enemies slightly tougher. And they would then evolve, in the normal way from there. It just gives a nice starting point that is, relative to how well the player has done. And of course, if the player has unlocked it, but has kind of not bothered with building them, then they're going to have a much harder time. And so, as I say, you could do that across the planet. So if they went to Gleba first and unlocked missile turrets, then that would add a few points of health on Volcanus and Falgora. So, that would then give you a fairly reasonable challenge at all levels. Talking about evolution, it seems to imply that they evolve in response to being killed. So a bit like normal biters where, you destroy the spawners and that causes the evolution factor to tick up even more. It also sounds like they will also evolve in response to the pollution, this equivalent of pollution on Gleba. And as I say, these do look, when you see where the nests are, like they are absorbing pollution. Now, how will it work, basically? The implication that I'm getting is that the only source of your pollution on Gleba is the agricultural areas. If we zoom in on this, we can basically see what appear to be, these appear to be where, because actually, it's Erendor's on the map, but this appears to be where the agricultural stuff is being grown. But yeah, these appear to be, as well, quite well defended. There's a lot of little red bits knocking about on there, which appear to be, I would suggest, turrets. So the idea being that this is where pollution is generated. The pentapods will come in and try and eat your fruit, and that's what they do. They're just there, they'll just chew on all the fruit. They won't necessarily destroy your plants, but as they do more planting, they'll eat the ones that you plant. Yeah? And so basically they then cut off your supply of new fruit. And so that's why it's got lots of turrets around it, so that it can defend against ones that are coming in to eat your stuff. As I say, it seems to be that these absorb pollution. These guys, I think, are the rafts, the egg rafts, okay? They're in quite dense clusters, in places. So these are quite big clusters of the egg rafts. Where I was kind of going with that is I think when they absorb, that's how they evolve. So they absorb it both from a point of view of maybe spawning additional enemies, basically, and that those ones will then come in and eat your stuff, but also that as they absorb more and more, they evolve, and that's what it talks about because you're using growth chemicals and all this sort of stuff that causes them to evolve in response to that, but that they also evolve when you kill them. So basically, as you kill more and more of the rafts, or maybe the actual enemies themselves, then they evolve in response to that, and that's how they work. So it's very, very similar to biters. And yeah, I think it's all about pollution being generated from the agricultural stuff. We can just see two big sort of plumes of stuff going on. A sort of side note that's interesting in this is, does that make this place actually quite a good place to build generally? Because if pollution from normal machines is not an issue on Gleba, if I move all of my stuff here, so people have been speculating about doing your science on Gleba, is that actually like a really good idea? Because you can then push all of your, stuff that would generate normal pollution on Nauvis, push it all onto Gleba. You don't have to worry about pollution at all. So that could be an interesting wrinkle, as it were, in your design choices and where you want to build. One of the things that does occur to me about the enemies as well is if the eggs are described as egg rafts, and that makes sense just from a stylistic point of view, a point that they can be dropped in the shallow sea, the bigger ones can spawn them and lay down new ones. But if they are rafts, can they move about? Because we do see here that there are a few sort of ones that you would probably expect the player would have killed, and destroyed. These seem very close and particularly there. So can they drift around? Now, obviously, as I say, I think the bigger ones will be able to spawn new ones, so they could have come from that. But is it also a mechanic that the things drift? That even if they're all up here, eventually maybe they'll drift down, they'll float around, and they'll become a problem even where they weren't. There's possibly references and stuff in these names. They're a bit weird because this is Yum Yum Yamiko Cannon and something Goodly Nut Goody Hut. So I don't know if they're references to things or just silly jokes. I don't know. Basically, these appear to be where the stuff is being grown because it looks like the shallow sea areas, and it appears to have like pickups and drop-offs and stuff like that, and then this is the main base. So this is where all of the stuff is being delivered to. So essentially they appear to be growing fruit in these two areas, and I think it's the two different ones, because if we zoom right in on this, we can see the pink seeds. We can't see what seeds are here, but I'm guessing this is the brain ones. And so this is like a train network that you can see. It's a bit higgledy-piggledy, the train network. But it's a train network that appears to be bringing stuff in, because then you've got the mash one there, and that looks like the brain one behind it. So it looks like the seeds are being taken out to be planted, and then the actual fruits are being brought back for processing, and that they're actually being processed in here. There is because these are tags, basically. So the actual station names are the angled ones. So there's tags that have been put on, and there's another tag here called Spawn Lawn. Now, whether that's a reference to that's where they spawned in the game, but it could be this mechanic that the biters that are, I keep saying biters, sorry, the pentapods that are being, grown in order to make biochambers. What's going to be interesting in that, just as a side thing, is how we're going to switch it off. So if you're making them in order to make biochambers, and you only need 100 biochambers, so you build 100 biochambers, that means having these grown ones, basically, that you've used in order to build biochambers. Well, if you've made 110 of the seed, the eggs, if you made 110 eggs, and you only need 100 of the biochambers, that means you've got 10 left over. They don't apparently spoil. They hatch into pentapods, so you can't. Well, can you just stick them in a biochamber in order to turn them into nutrients? Is that what you can do with them? Because otherwise, you just created basically 10. And the other thing, you can obviously manage it with circuit network, but yeah, it's interesting. Let's say, what do you do with the excess? Because you're not going to have any use for it. So another thing there might be that's why that's called Spawn Lawn, that is where they're intending for these excess I guess I keep saying biters, excess pentapods to grow out of the eggs, because there seem to be quite a lot of defences around this. Yeah, there's little bits of turrets, yeah, every so often. It's obviously very difficult to see without the full zoom in. So I'm wondering if that's the idea, that they've just set it up so that when these things spawn out of the eggs, they will just get killed by the turrets that are knocking around. So I guess one of the other things that's really obvious on this map is that you've got a iron ore drop and a copper ore drop station. We can't really see where those are being mined. Or I can't, anyway. I can't see any kind of pickup icon. There's not a iron ore pickup or anything like that. I think partly that's because they're using the whole prioritization system, so it perhaps defaults to this symbol here for pickup. And you do have quite a few random stations about. This one was, I thought, maybe the closest to maybe that's where there's an iron ore thing, maybe. And could maybe that be copper then? But I can't see the copper patch. There do appear to be copper patches certainly on the map. So there's one right at the top here. This here, I'm pretty sure is a copper patch. Iron was more tricky to see because there's quite a lot of blue stuff on the map. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that's a copper patch. Maybe that's iron there? Don't know. One of the things about these though is they do look very small. People were saying about limited amounts of iron ore and copper ore on the map. I think the devs kind of confirmed, but it didn't seem to percolate through, that they're really rich patches. So this would kind of tie up as well with the whole pollution's not a problem thing, because if you can just stick a train in, mine the stuff up, all of the enemies don't really care. They don't care about the pollution. It's not a problem. Instead, what you really want, I would suggest then, is to just build a patch and it lasts forever. You don't have to bother repairing it for damage, refuel, restocking it with ammo or any of that stuff. So why not just give you really, really rich patches? Making them small just means, I guess, the logistics is a little simpler. But yeah, I believe that the patches that we're going to have are going to be really, really rich. Now, what there isn't then, as far as I can tell, is a drop-off for stone and a drop-off for oil. Okay? If we say... Oh, and I suppose uranium as well, but I'm taking it as read that uranium is only on Nauvis, but, we never know. But I don't see there didn't appear to be a drop-off for stone right next to these, or anywhere in the base. So, is there a source for stone here, or not? And oil, we still haven't really got to the heart of the whole... Is the point of Gleba that it's able to do a bio version of oil products, basically, and you don't need to mess about with all the stuff. You can just make sulfuric acid and sulfur and plastic and all that sort of stuff directly, and you don't need to mess about with oil processing, because this base is actually pretty small, as I say, but whether that's because it's early game or it's just super efficient, we don't really know. One of the things on that uranium front is that obviously this is a fission reactor going on here. Yeah, that's the fission reactor symbol, so clearly that's how they're powering it. So I would therefore assume that they are sending uranium to Gleba. I suppose it's worth noting that this appears to be... So we've got stations basically here going Gleba defense drop-off and Gleba defense drop-off, and then we've got a place here that's got an explosive rocket symbol, and it appears to be a station, and so I'm wondering if that says Gleba defense pickup, and that basically this is being defended by explosive missile armed rocket turrets, missile turrets. Getting myself all mixed up, but basically that's what they're doing. They're making explosive rockets, explosive missiles, and they require explosives, right? And as I say, we don't have a native way, because the other thing that's missing, I didn't mention, sorry, when I was doing that bit, there's no coal drop-off, okay? Does that mean there's an alternate recipe for explosives? Does that mean coal is being shipped in? How are they making explosives in order to make explosive rockets? It's not at all clear. So, getting more into my tinfoil hat territory, where I pick apart phrasings that the devs probably didn't mean anything by. In this bit here, it says, we knew we wanted many different new enemies of very different types. I don't know about you, I would not classify 3 new enemies, I guess maybe technically 9 if you're talking about the 3 different levels, but 3 new enemies as many. Okay, many to me means more than that. Now, we've already basically been told that there are some form of enemy on Volcanus, so that's going to double what we're talking about here, I would say. We're probably going to get 3 levels or something again, maybe more. They could have different variety of types of enemies on Volcanus, where these are different but sort of similar. In the same way that you have biters and spitters, you can have different things on Volcanus. But does that also mean we're getting enemies on Aquila? Is Aquila going to have enemies? They've used some interesting phrasings when talking about the threats that you might have, about talking about organic enemies and most planets having new military targets and things like that. So I think this is probably more confirmation that there's perhaps more hidden stuff than we suspect, that the one hint about Volcanus doesn't represent all of the enemies that are coming. And again, the next paragraph also says, we also knew that at least some of the enemies should be very large. I don't know about you, but I'm not sure I would count 2 as some of the enemies. Maybe, but maybe there is another very big enemy, okay? Maybe Aquila has some boss enemy or something like that. It feels like we're missing a little bit of the puzzle there, and that maybe there is another big enemy to slot in. It could be in space, it could be a new thing on Nauvis, there's all sorts of possibilities of where it could be. And as I've said in my combat video and the other ones, and hopefully I'll talk about it in the biter one if I manage to rework what that's about. But I think there's some automated turret or something like that on Gora, and that represents an enemy there, and that could be a big thing. It could be a big turret, bit like we're getting bigger turrets. Tesla turrets and missile turrets are a bigger footprint, so it could be a similar sort of thing, that we're getting a big automated turret enemy to attack. But as I say, I would not personally classify 3 and 2 as many and some, but maybe they do. all I've got left now is a few of the smaller ones. I'm sure there's stuff I've missed, you know. I've tried... One of the problems with doing these videos in this whole format, and this isn't a complaint, you know, it's part of the thing, is that there's sometimes in these big ones there is so much that it's impossible for me to see it all and record a video. It's like, for example, when this video goes, we'll actually... because the next point is about this video, but if we start this video, watch this brain tree here, okay? So if we start this off again, do you see something falling away there? What's that about? But, you know, it could be anything, you know, it could just be that it's spawned in and it drops something down. But, I say, there's something that sort of falls to the ground there. What's that about? And I say, there is so much, you know, tiny little things that I miss and don't see. So what this is basically, the message is if you see anything, and, you know, do put a comment in, because I'd love to know all of the stuff that's going on and what we've seen and what your theories are. So yeah, do give us a comment. But what I really wanted to point out is that these appear to be the brain fruits in the wild. So it appears to be, you know, this point that Arundel was making, that they eat the same things that you're trying to grow, appears to be potentially that these will be the natural spawn points for these plants. So basically the brain fruits are here because these guys are going to eat the brain fruits, basically. And so we can assume the same would happen with the other, you know, the mash enemy. And so maybe there's a double challenge, that when you go in and you're trying to harvest these guys, you can also get more seeds by chopping down the trees and harvesting them as well. The other thing to note on them, I guess, very quickly, is that this appears to now be the final, like, in-game texture proper. When we saw them the first time, they were clearly just hand-drawn, and so this appears to be like the 3D, you know, texture version of the actual brain fruits. And, like, you know, they look great, and presumably what's going to happen with them is they're going to grow. So these look like they're fairly juvenile, you know, they're fairly young plants, which is interesting because it implies that they can spawn naturally and they'll just grow up. But basically, you know, as they grow and turn into the big brain fruits, then I think there'll be a set of, you know, animations for them. We don't actually particularly see them moving, I don't think. We do know, we have sort of seen things growing, like the mash and stuff. But whether it does that a lot quicker when you're growing them because you're pumping chemicals into them, I don't know. But yeah, as I say, it's nice to see the final, I assume, texture of those rather than the placeholder drawings. The other thing on this one here was, it was lovely to hear the music. Sounds like it's using quite a bit of strings, but there appears to be like some bits of it being played backwards essentially. And it does appear, this one seems to be a bit of a mix of electronica and like more classical instruments. You know, so you're getting a string note there, but also like a electronica type noise going on. So yeah, it was lovely to hear another bit of the music track going on. Oh, and the final one in the video here as well, and I'm actually going to try and see if I can do it on my YouTube. So once this is all done, the logo comes up. Can you see this is animated? I'm going to pause it quite a few times because it will run out basically, but you see it's animated. Isn't that a lovely touch? I had no idea it was going to be like that. I'm hoping that that's, you know, they'll keep that, you know, across all of the, where they're showing the logo. But yeah, it looks like it's got a piston moving here, and, you know, there's some rotation going on. I think that's a lovely touch. But yeah, I love that this has got a, you know, an animation to it, and it's actually got a sound. It actually sounds like a running engine. But yeah, that's a lovely little touch. I hope you enjoyed today's Friday Facts, and you might consider coming back for another one. If you'd like to chat about the latest Factorio Friday Facts, you can find me live streaming Factorio every weekend over my Twitch channel @TrisMagistus. Thanks for watching. Cheers. If you attack a nearby alley,